Hi, my name's Colin Jarvis and I'm with Stealth Belt Inc. And today we're going to be talking about 5 tips that you can use to go swimming comfortably and securely with your ostomy. Before I get started with the 5 tips that you can use to go swimming with your ostomy, I first want to make sure that I put out the disclaimer that all of the ostomy appliances that are out there, whether it's Hollister, Convatec, Coloplast, or others, those are all going to be made with adhesives that are meant to be able to go in the water. So there's no reason to need to keep that appliance totally dry. They're made to be able to get wet and to dry off and keep that seal nice, safe, and secure. So just as a starting point, make sure that you're not overly concerned with something that you don't need to be. However, there are a number of other obvious reasons if you have an ostomy why you might want to prepare ahead of time to go swimming with an ostomy and learn some of these tricks and tips because, even though the appliances are made to be able to get wet, when they are wet, they're a little bit more likely to shift or move around, which can end up leading to leaks later on. And so these tips are to help you prepare for all of those potential things and just have as good of a springboard to launch off to as possible. No pun intended. So the first tip that I'll start off with for swimming with your ostomy is going to be using a barrier ring. Barrier rings are great for helping provide a better seal for your ostomy and can be used with any ostomy appliance. It's something that you're putting on while you're actually putting the ostomy appliance on when you're switching out to a new bag. When thinking about the way a barrier ring actually works with an ostomy, I like to think of the analogy of a washer with like nuts and bolts. 2 of the primary functions of using a washer with nuts and bolts are to help reduce corrosion around where the bolt actually is and to prevent loosening from happening over time. Both of those things apply equally to the way that they work with our ostomies, and so I really like that analogy. When it comes to actually going swimming in the pool, one of the most important things that you can do generally is just to make sure that you have a really good seal and that you've checked and made sure that there's no leakage or damage to the adhesives, and using a barrier ring can help ensure that that happens for longer periods of time. The second tip that I would recommend for getting into the water with your ostomy is to look into what's called a barrier extender. Sometimes these are also called barrier strips or barrier crescents, but essentially what they're made to do is help extend the wear time of your appliance by extending the surface area of the actual adhesive touching your skin. A lot of times when I go to swim or in a pool or an ocean or anything like that, I don't start by putting the barrier extenders on. Some people may do that, but I find that they're most helpful when one of the problems, like the edges of the adhesive, starts to come up a bit. Once I notice that happening, I'll go dry off a little bit and then I'll put the extender on and continue with my time in the water, whatever that might be. However, if you know that this is something that happens commonly whenever you get in the water, it might be better just to start with those preemptively, knowing that it's something that's probably going to happen and you can just get that extension right from the get-go. The third tip on my list for swimming with an ostomy is, of course, to use a stealth belt. One of the reasons that I fell in love with stealth belt was because it helped me feel supported and comfortable when doing things that were physically active, and that includes going in the water. There are a few different ways in which the stealth belt can be used to help make going in the water with your ostomy more comfortable. For one of the primary things that I think about when I get into the water and have noticed as somebody who actually has an ostomy is that any amount of air that might be trapped in that bag is going to cause it to float, and I'll be walking around in the pool or the ocean with what essentially equates to a little buoy. And that can be downright uncomfortable, if not just kind of embarrassing and kind of silly looking. So personally, I like the fact that the stealth belt holds the ostomy appliance inside of the internal pouch of the belt and prevents that like buoy sensation from happening with your bag and any amount of air that might be in there. Another primary benefit to using a stealth belt when you're in the water is that it's going to help hold the adhesive and the appliance itself to your body. Like I mentioned in the beginning, when these adhesives get wet, they're a little more likely to shift or move around slightly, which may not be a big issue in the immediate, but it does tend to make the wear time of the appliance a little shorter in the whole. But if you're wearing a stealth belt, a lot of times that pressure can help the adhesive maintain its place, keep that seal, prevent those minor leaks that cause the bigger problems later on, and extend the overall lifespan of your bag, especially if you're somebody who goes in the water a lot. And finally, another great reason to use a stealth belt when you're going to go swimming with your ostomy is just generally for the concealment aspect. I think one of the big challenges that most of us with ostomies face when doing something new like swimming again is the psychological component. It can be really scary to do something like going to a public swimming area for the first time after having an ostomy. A lot of times we can be concerned about what our ostomy might look like, Other people may not know what it is, or if they do, they might have some unwarranted concerns about what it's like to have one in the water. And generally, I know that personally, I just don't really want to have eyes on me that are unnecessary or unwanted. So in that way, I feel that particularly in situations where water sports and water activities are involved, the stealth belt's concealment element and the fact that it just doesn't really look like a medical appliance, it's made to be stealthy, that can make it a really great option for helping get past some of those psychological barriers to doing something like swimming again. At Stealth Belt, we have a number of different belts for different reasons, but there are two that I recommend in particular for water activities. The first is the Stealth Belt Pro. It's kind of our all-purpose, everyday wear style belt. It's a lighter weight, more breathable fabric. And so if you're just looking to do more casual swimming, the Stealth Belt Pro is definitely the best option because it's more usable for a range of activities. But our other option is actually called the neoprene stealth belt, which I've got here. And it looks just like the Pro, except for that material is going to be made of neoprene, which is going to be more robust, and it's going to allow for more distinct pressure, so you can tighten it down more around the waist. And the reason that we have this distinction as a separate belt is to make sure that when you're moving through the water quickly, so if you're doing something like lap swimming, you're in the ocean where it's turbulent waters, or maybe you're doing something even more intense like wakeboarding off the back of a boat, this more robust fabric is going to hold its shape better as you move through the water, where the other belt might catch some drag because, again, with a thinner fabric, if you're moving through water, it's going to cause drag, but neoprene is a more robust material which should help eliminate that issue. The fourth tip that I'll talk about in regards to swimming with your ostomy is going to be all about preparation, and there's going to be a few different elements here. The first is going to be just preparing your actual ostomy setup. So making sure that you've got your barrier rings applied properly, that your adhesive is secure and hasn't come up in any spots that it might otherwise shouldn't, and that you're generally ready to get into the water with the ostomy that you currently have applied. If there's any damages to the seal or anything that might be indicative of a leak, it's best just to make sure to switch into a new appliance before jumping in the water. The next part of the preparation phase is to just make sure that you have a backup from all of your supplies. So a different bag, different wafers, new barrier rings, more barrier extenders. We never want these problems to happen, and in most likelihood, you shouldn't have any issues with the bags coming off or leaking, coming loose. But there's always that chance that it does happen, and it's better to have everything ready and not need it than to need everything and not have it ready. So just make sure when you're preparing that you always keep your backup supplies available to you that you can switch into should something come up when you're in the water. The next part of the preparation phase that I'll mention is to just make sure that when you're getting into the water that you start with an empty bag. What I mentioned in the beginning, sometimes if there's any amount of air in that bag, it kind of cause that buoy sensation, or just generally if there's anything in there and a leak does happen, then it's going to be worse than if it was empty. So before going in the water, it's probably best to make sure that you empty the bag first. And what I like to do to take it even a step further is to kind of plan my meals ahead of time. So I make sure not to eat a big meal right before going into the swimming pool or into a water area, which I think is just generally good advice for anybody going into the water, but I think especially so for us when we have less control over when the ostomy decides to do its thing and when it doesn't. And the final piece of the preparation phase that I'll mention is just to make sure you pick out a swimsuit or swimwear that you're going to feel comfortable and confident in. I think, like I mentioned, a lot of this swimming with an ostomy challenge is going to be a psychological battle, and so making sure that you feel comfortable in the way that you're presenting yourself is going to be a big part of having a positive experience. I find that the Stealth Belt helps make me feel really confident, and I'll just use like a black or darkly colored swimsuit that kind of matches along with this. And I feel like most people don't have any idea that I'm even wearing anything additional besides the bathing suit. And so I think that that's just always important to reiterate that a lot of these challenges and these fears and apprehensions we have about swimming with an ostomy are things that we need to deal with psychologically. And so preparing with something that makes you feel really strong and confident in the way that you're presenting yourself to the public can go a long way to making this a better experience. And finally, for tip number 5, I'm going to talk about drying off your appliance, which I believe to be one of the more important steps for having a good experience with swimming with an ostomy. So for one, what I recommend starting with is once you get out of the water and you're not going to be going back in anytime soon, to get your towel and lightly pat down and dry the actual adhesive as much as you can. Getting rid of that water quickly is going to help the adhesive dry faster, and most of the adhesives that these ostomy companies use are going to be heat activated. So that means your body heat, the temperature from your actual body, is going to help that seal re-adhere once you get out of the water. And so the sooner you can get that moisture away from the adhesive, the faster that seal is going to re-adhere using your body warmth. The second thing I'd mention as an option for drying off your appliance once you get out of the water is actually to have a second stealth belt ready to go that's dry when you get out of the water. Particularly the Stealth Belt Pro or the slip-on, those options that are made entirely with our lighter weight, more moisture wicking fabrics, those can be really great to put on immediately after and switch out of a wet belt into a dry one, because the material itself is going to help wick away the moisture from the adhesive of the ostomy and helps it dry faster. So I really like having a dry stealth belt to switch into right after I get out of the water and I know I'm going to be out of the water for a while. And finally, the third thing I'll mention in regards to drying off your appliance once you get out of the water is to make sure that if you're going to use a blow dryer, that you use a low heat setting. A lot of people like to use these blow dryers to help dry the adhesive even faster than an air dry or wearing a dry stealth belt can do. But one of the problems with these blow dryers is the ones that get really hot can actually melt the adhesive and cause leaks to be more likely. And so you want to make sure as you're drying off the adhesive, if you choose to use a blow dryer, use the low heat setting so that it doesn't melt the adhesive that's around the actual stoma that's the most important part of that seal. And so those were my 5 favorite tips for getting back into the water with an ostomy and making sure that it's a comfortable and secure experience. If there's anything that you felt like I missed or left out of this, please let me know in the comments or otherwise. I'd love to continue building out this resource for other people to have this available. But if this is your first time getting into the water, rest assured it's something that you can absolutely do with the right preparation and the right tools. So don't be afraid of it. Just do things slowly, do things intentionally, but don't let the fact that you have an ostomy stop you from getting in the water. But until next time, happy swimming.